But why?
Come on, Shauna.
Are you still in love with me?
Oh my God. No. This is what you do, Shauna. You create your own problems. You stir the pot just to feel alive. You stew and you seethe, and you make it everyone else's problem because you hate to be alone. You hate yourself. And you want everyone else to feel just as miserable as you are. All right, I'm sorry, I forgot. Sanity's off the table. Whoever the fuck you are, you better get out here right now. You have no idea whose house you just walked into. Oops, my bad.
Please.
The cause of the accident remains preliminary. The crash site was over 600 miles.
In 1996, a high school girls soccer team from Muskega High School was on their way to nationals. Unfortunately, this flight was never destined to actually make it. The flight path had left the plane veering off course about 600 miles north, and everyone on that plane was presumed lost or dead. Survivors of the crash were out there for around 19 months, and upon their rescue, their numbers had dwindled a lot less than to those who had entered onto the plane that day. Who were the members of the Yellowjackets soccer team that got stranded out there in the wilderness? What was their story, and what was their role to play in the girls' survival out there? In this series of videos, I hope to break down each one of the Yellowjackets soccer team that has had a bit of a narrative element or enough context to piece together what their story could actually be. As well as, if their character's still around by the time of shooting this, I will be predicting where their character could go.
That being said, hello wilderness survivors, fellow Mudbeards, and Yellowjackets if you're watching. And we're officially starting off on my new series of videos hoping to break down each one of the Yellowjackets. I'm going to be trying to release these leading up to Season 3 finale, but there's a chance that it will actually go past that point. Either way, I'm really interested in diving into each one of these characters and kind of putting my own thoughts onto video form. But I'm sure there'll be many things I miss, so if you know any interesting facts or trivia about some of the characters or actors playing them, then feel free to let me know down in the comments. Either way, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it.
Oh, that's great.
Either way, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. And what better way to contribute to a Monday of all things than covering the Malicious Melissa? Now, you might be wondering, out of all the titles I've given, how come I gave Melissa the Malicious title? Shouldn't that belong to Shauna? Well, it's twofold. One, I made an In Defense of Shauna Shipman video that ages more and more poorly every single week. That and coming up with these names is really hard, and I feel like Melissa, after the most recent episode, should be considered pretty malicious. But not just for the most recent episode, and I'll get into that. Before we move forward, I want to say that Melissa is meticulously played by Jenna Burgess masterfully, and I think it's really interesting how she's brought a lot of life into the character. But going forward, I'm going to mainly be referencing just the character, not really the acting skills, which really have proven themselves this season. But I will touch on those skills more towards the end. But to stick with the character, Melissa is a character who arguably is one of the most easy to hate characters in all of the Yellowjackets fandom. And that comes for a multitude of reasons. It's not because she maybe has done the worst acts or maybe is the most mean to everybody around her. It's simply because of the agency she's had within the plot and how it's been delivered to us. Let me explain. Melissa is so evil that she didn't even have the decency to show up in Season 1. She's probably out hanging out with the lady in the trees or cabin guy or something, and then once people actually started suffering, she decided to come in and add a little bit to that suffering. Bring in Season 2, where we finally get a good look at Melissa as a character and Jenna Burgess finally steps into the fray. We don't see too many lines with her, but we do get more establishments with her and a Season 1 veteran, Jen. See, with so many characters having so many pivotal arcs throughout the season and going in so many different directions, it's hard to get a good gauge what the group of people think as a whole. These characters and their comments throughout the situations perfectly capture what everybody thinks who isn't necessarily in the forefront all the time. Interestingly enough, a lot of these comments we get from them in the second season are pretty mean. To be fair, they're in desperate situations and everybody's stressed and overwhelmed. But what I mean by this is there are two particular scenes that I did find very interesting. At one point, when one of the girls goes missing in a snowstorm, Melissa and Jen are talking, and they're mentioning how if the person out there freezes to death, they might have to find her and eat her because it's what the wilderness would want, right? Basically showing us that the girls are already justifying cannibalism amongst their camp. Fast forward this to later, when the girls are starving and genuinely wondering what to do, and Shauna tries to go ahead and help a beat up Lottie. Melissa had a very dark comment about how now Shauna wanted to help Lottie all of a sudden when before she's been very hostile towards everyone. Could be seen as dismissive or rude, could be seen as saying some real stuff because Shauna was kind of losing her mental back then. But I want to note how cruel it was to actually say something like this here. Everyone in the cabin at this point is struggling hard. And Shauna, while being able to let loose on Lottie the previous night, was currently dealing with the most trauma in the entire group. So Shauna's able to somewhat pull herself together enough to act nice enough to cover up Lottie or be a little decent really does just clue us into her sort of malicious nature. It also tells us that she wasn't necessarily head over heels for Shauna when they first met. Which brings us to Season 3. Season 3 starts and Melissa has gotten a lot more agency throughout the narrative. And it picks off right away with Melissa starting off a very explosive relationship with Shauna. And while Melissa approaches this as in she's very respecting of Shauna and appreciates her power dynamic amongst the rest of the group, I do think it's more focused on the latter. I think Melissa is more interested in power and or protection. We see throughout the season in the 96 timeline that she is kind of a fearful person, but we also get glimpses of her more malicious nature. And if we take what's said in the adult timeline into consideration, she never really even liked Shauna in the first place. She's really just using that relationship to maintain some footing within the camp. This just shows us that Melissa is kind of a sneaky person, and I want to add a little bit more context to this. Throughout the season, as her and Shauna's relationship is developing, Melissa at first starts echoing a lot of Shauna's objections. And eventually this transforms into Melissa instigating a lot of problems by speaking up, and consequentially leading other people like Jen to start acting out as well. Melissa taking this agency shows us that she's not just a lapdog for Shauna, but she's trying to become Shauna in some way. At the end of the day, despite how awful Shauna is, she is kind of a real one, and if a real one puts you in your place, you're gonna get humbled. And throughout the season, we get these small glimpses of Melissa staring at all the girls as she gets to be with the toughest one in camp. But as soon as the toughest one in camp starts to turn on her, we see that she immediately flocks back to the girls. And no, I'm not talking about how after their fight she went back to Jen and is just like, yeah, she is crazy. I mean the fact that during their argument, when she walks away, before she finally bites back, she looks at all the girls surrounding her, and she knows what's driving Shauna the craziest the most, and that's that people actually think she's crazy. So her using all the girls as a weapon against her in that moment and saying, you're right everybody, she is crazy, is the equivalent of someone in hide and seek going to other people and saying, they found us guys, they found us, you're right, they found us. This is sneaky malicious behavior is my point. Now cut to the adult timeline, where Melissa is reintroduced in a very confusing but interesting way. Adult Melissa is played by Hilary Swank, who most people who've been a fan of film and TV know well of her name. And while a lot of people seem to have opinions on their performance, my own personal opinion is that Hilary Swank's performance is very interesting to watch. For now, I want to talk about the actual character of Melissa purely, and I will say that it's interesting how they managed to capture both the adult timeline and the 96 timeline Melissa in the perfect moment of their innocence and then transition into their malicious nature. In the 96 timeline, Melissa seems to be leaning towards team escape, team non-crazy, but we could tell by the time the adult timeline kicks around, Melissa has fully fallen off the deep end. Now sure, you could argue that given the circumstances that played out, she was really just defending herself in the acts that took place in episode 9, and she really was in the right. However, I think there's a lot of context and clues to show us that she's kind of just insane as everybody else. Whether it be blatantly obvious, the words she used after she took out Van, or it be the fact that post the rescue, she seemed to not be able to let go of her connections to any of the events out there. Immediately following Hannah's daughter, eventually falling in love with her, whether it be through grief, trauma, or whatever have you, and then changing her whole identity to be able to be with her. And sure, 25 years, maybe she was just completely normal, who knows? The only problem is, after 25 years, after the events of season 2, she decided to come back into play and send Shauna some tapes. And there was a letter attached to it that supposedly will explain a lot more, but the way Melissa was explaining herself, she was acting sort of like a victim, like she was surprised everybody was reacting to her this way. Which all the women did clarify, and I agree, why would she think that sending that tape to Shauna would be a good idea in the first place? I think Melissa knew exactly what kind of reaction she was going to get from Shauna. And I think Melissa misses some of the energy and tension that she would get from these confrontations with Shauna. Just think about the fact that their first confrontation, she has a knife up to her throat. Then cut to the scene when they're at their stands fighting against each other. Shauna and her are kind of daring each other to lose it a little bit. Cut to the adult timeline, and however the rest of the 96 timeline plays out, it's obvious that this weird, strange, dark tension between them still is lingering around just a little bit. I especially think that that whole arm scene with Shauna and Melissa kind of triggered some sort of want for that same sort of darkness again. And we know it's not too uncommon for these survivors to embrace that darkness in the adult timeline. For some survivors, it may be out of desperation, or it may be because they have no choice, and for some survivors, it's just for quote-unquote not having a boring life. That being said, as of the making of this video, Melissa is still around, and I'm really interested to see where her character will go for the rest of the series. See, I would not have expected one of the adult survivors to have confirmed to be Melissa, but the fact that they did happen to bring her back and they're being played by Hilary Swank was really interesting to see. And now that they've added the element that she is a bit vicious and maybe seemingly trying to take down all the Yellowjackets in the adult timeline, I'm really intrigued to see where they're going to go with her plot. All this series, I've just wanted a character to be against the Yellowjackets in a pretty significant way, so we can watch this sort of back and forth throughout the adult timeline. And while in Season 2 I thought Detective Mustache was going to be that character, unfortunately he hasn't made a return. So while the structure of the narrative may be a little bit finicky, I do really enjoy the scenes we're getting with Melissa, because we're finally having someone not only holding up a mirror to the women's actions, but someone who wants to take them out altogether. Either way, I do want to clarify that even though it's noticeable that Melissa's gotten a lot more scenes this season, I do think that we should take ourselves out of the structure of the narrative for a second and appreciate the performances we see on screen. Hilary Swank is a seasoned actor, and even though people have always been back and forth on some of her skills, I personally found a lot of her scenes throughout this season very engaging. And let's hope by the season finale it will all be narratively satisfying. But we also cut to the 96 timeline, where in Season 2, Jenna Burgess didn't get much to say, and in Season 3 we can see she has a lot to bring to the table. I think it's always good when production on a series decides to give some of their extras or more background characters more time to shine on screen. Because let's be honest, any aspiring actor, that's all you really want, is to be put in a show, maybe even as an extra, and slowly get carved out into your own personal character. And while some people seem to be against the idea of background characters getting more agency or having more to say, personally I really enjoy that stuff, unless the background characters are simply there to replace main characters. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think Melissa's genuinely malicious, or do you think she's sort of just a product of trauma like all the other girls? Who do you think is actually more malicious, Shauna or Melissa? Either way, I'm excited to see where they bring her story in Season 3 and where it will be headed in Season 4. Thank you so much for watching, appreciate all your support, and remember, cannibalism is a crime and so should that hat be.